Hello, friends, enemies, and those still under review. Welcome or welcome back to L Chats, where I chat once a week about something I'm a fan of. This week, we're shifting away from the recent bout of anime and shifting to a book series. New achievement! This is the first time you've talked about Dungeon Crawler Carl on your channel. Reward? Nothing! Knowing you spent time writing a script and recording this video is enough. And a reward all on its own. Yes, this week we're going to be talking about the first installment of Dungeon Crawler Carl, the book that started it all. This series has spawned multiple adaptations from webtoons to graphic novels to even TTRPGs, as well as shirts, enamel pins, and finally, and certainly not least, excellent audiobooks by Jeff Hayes. With all of that said, let's get into it. Matt Dinniman wrote Dungeon Crawler Carl and first self-published to Royal Road and then on Amazon under his imprint Dandy House in 2019, according to beautifulbooks.info. Ace Books, a subsidiary to Penguin House, purchased the rights to the first 6 books, the physical editions at least, in 2024. Dinniman retains digital rights, so he continues to publish to Amazon and maintains creative control of the series. Book 8, A Parade of Horribles, is out later this year in May. The genre of the books is kind of niche. It is a literary role-playing game book, say that 3 times fast, or lit RPG, and according to the man himself, lit RPG is a narrative frame that uses video game mechanics to structure the world and story, but also includes things like achievements, skills, and so on. Some get very down in the weeds, while others don't let the effects impact the narrative as much. Dinniman's book series is the latter. Now that we've laid out the narrative framework, let's talk about the plot. The plot is easy enough to grasp. An intergalactic organization, the Syndicate, is flexing its claim on Earth and Earth minerals, and as such will be making the world into a dungeon, effective immediately. Carl, along with his ex-girlfriend's cat, survives the initial event of world collapse and enter the dungeon. If they make it to level 18, they can claim Earth back from the Syndicate. The rights to broadcast the World Dungeon is owned by the Bornt Corporation this season. Yes, there are multiple seasons of World Dungeons. The apocalypse will be televised, as the tagline to the book says. This first book only covers the first and second floors of the dungeon, ending at the start of the third. It wastes no time getting into the action and plot. Literally within the first couple of pages, plot's kicked off. It is told primarily in the first person point of view, with the narrator and person we are viewing this world through being Carl.
Carl, that kills people!
With that being said, let's get into the characters. Let's start with Carl. Carl is a 27-year-old veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard. Right now, he works as a Marine tech, or pre-collapse worked as a Marine tech in Seattle. He was outside at 2:23 a.m. trying desperately to get the indoor cat, Princess Donut, back inside. He amusingly enters the world dungeon without wearing pants or proper footwear. Carl can be a bit of a hothead, and it's hinted that he's had a rather traumatic upbringing. He shows his resourcefulness almost immediately and throughout this book, where he uses dungeon exploits in order to get ahead of something. He also stands at 6 foot 3 inches tall and enters the dungeon at about 230 pounds. He is, as he says, a large dude. This large dude is accompanied by a GC, BWR, NW, Princess Donut, the Queen Anne Chalk, a tortoiseshell Persian with a flat face who competes in cat shows and has won quite a few of them. She eats an enchanted pet biscuit and transforms into basically another sapient being. The buff is called enhanced growth. Now she's just a regular crawler just like Carl. Honestly, Princess Donut is my favorite. She's got some of the wittiest one-liners in the entire series. And it's just interesting to watch her grow from just a cat to a person, really. Princess Carl and Donut are led by a tutorial guild master known as Mordecai. He appears as a rat folk in this dungeon, though his world was also a syndicate taken over world. We find out that he is a former crawler, and this was a deal he took to get out of the dungeon. It is his last cycle, as he says, of this kind of work. They do change his species every floor, so he ends up as a bugbear on the next floor. Between the floors, Princess Donut and Carl get pulled in for an interview with Odette. It's called Dungeon Crawler After Hours with Odette. Odette turns out to be a very unique looking person, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get removed from the algorithm if I provide the description of her here. Suffice to say, she wears a bug helmet and crab legs and
It's got huge tracts of land.
but it turns out that's all just a facade and a character she puts on for the audience. Now she outright tells Carl and Princess Donut that she has a past with Mordecai, that she was his guide at one point in time, and sends him back with a message to tell Mordecai to seek her out. Mordecai does not take kindly to this message. One definitely gets the feeling that Odette has a lot of grit to be where she is, as well as she has some level, at least, of intelligence and cleverness in order to get out of the world dungeon. It's safe to say that Odette has ulterior motives in interviewing Princess Donut and Carl, but as you'll figure out reading through this book, everybody has ulterior motives. Since we're on the topic of alien characters, I'm going to bring up the next major alien character, whose name is Zev. Zev is a representative of the Borant Corporation. She is a Kuatin, who are the species that own and run Borant Corporation. She's not a party member, so we get a little bit more frankness from her, and she and Princess Donut bond over their love of Gossip Girl. Zev gets initially removed for reportedly warning Carl that something bad was about to happen. However, the AI determined that Carl noticed the bad event occurring at exactly the same time that Zev warned him about it, so she gets reinstated as their PR person. While she is not their PR person, they get put on this show called Death Watch Extreme Dungeon Mayhem, run by Maestro, a prince of the Skull Clan, a species of space orc. Literal space orcs. Glurp, glurp. Carl makes this guy so mad that he pledges that he will be part of the games in later levels, level 9 specifically. That about wraps up the alien characters, so let's talk a little bit more about the humans. Please note that I really am just trying to go over the first book. We run into a couple of groups, and there are mentions of other humans by name, such as Lucia Marr, who has 2 Dobermans. The group that Carl and Princess Donut run into is called Meadowlark, a retirement community. This community loosely includes Agatha, but she was the one who set fire to the building, which made the retirement home residents evacuate. Brandon Ann, Chris Andrews, Amani C, and Yolanda are the 4 main people coming from Meadowlark, along with a multitude of residents. There are maybe a couple mentioned by name, Jack, Mrs. McGibbons, but those are the main ones you need to be aware of. Chris and Brandon are brothers, and Yolanda is around 50 years old and stands about 5'4". They fight alongside Carl and help defeat the first level boss prior to him being yanked to the show with Odette. They also meet up the next floor, and it is a member of their party, a member of the nursing home, essentially, who triggers the, I don't want to say boss fight, because it's more like a punishment. Like the AI is taking it out on the people that you should not be urinating in the hallways. There are bathrooms, and you will only be supplied 1 roll of toilet paper, so boo on you if you run out. But they do all have kind of complementary skill sets that, when combined, allow Carl to use explosions to the greatest capability. That's all I can really say about that without spoiling too much. And for Agatha, I will talk more about her, but that's more for the next section. Finally, there are 2 characters I haven't spoke on at all, mostly because one of them shows up in the very end of the book and the other is very pervasive throughout the novel. That is the AI and Mongo. The AI is reportedly, in their own words, a syndicate neutral observer, and has been newly created and dispatched to the planet to run the world dungeon and then ensure that all the rules and regulations are properly followed. We mostly see the AI pop up in announcements and reading out the accomplishments of Carl and Princess Donut. The AI also announces all of the boss fights and who's fighting in said boss fights. Finally, it also reads aloud all of the items and the descriptions of said items. The AI can be really funny and has been programmed to understand Earth culture, so if you don't read the AI announcements, you're missing out. You're 100% missing out. One of the very early ones is the description of Goblin Engineer Level 3, and I quote, "Engineers, the incels of the Goblin world. They have a hard time finding a date, which makes them extra angry. If there are any females in your party, they will attack them first." The AI has very particular interests, a la Quentin Tarantino. If you know, you know. I know I'm not monetized right now, but I don't want to risk it, guys. And finally, we're to Mongo. Mongo doesn't come in until it's almost time to move on to the third floor. Mongo is short for, and I'm 100% going to butcher this, Mongolensis? If you are a big fan of dinosaurs, you might already know what that is, but Mongo is a velociraptor that they find as a baby. Donut insists on taking the velociraptor, by the way. I almost forgot there are 2 more humans. There's Frankie Q and Maggie Mai, and I would love to talk about them more in the next section, which is about his use of Chekov's gun. According to Toronto Film School, Chekov's gun is a narrative principle where an element introduced into a story first seems unimportant but will later take on great significance, and this is something that Matt Dinneman excels at. One example is one that has turnaround in the space of a chapter. Princess Donut and Carl have gone to a safe room, and they notice that in this safe room there are cookies. And if you eat a cookie, you get experience. And unfortunately, due to experience point sharing rules, Carl gets 0.2 and Princess Donut gets 9.8 when she eats a cookie, which means that when Carl eats a cookie, Donut will get 0.2 and he'll get 9.8. It's here that they run into Frankie Q, whose Chekov gun had been loaded much earlier in the book when they discovered the body of a dead crawler who had been killed by a fellow crawler. Not a monster, a crawler. So Frankie Q tries to say that he's alone, but when he eats a cookie, it pops up 9.8 XP. That Chekov gun went off pretty immediately, didn't it? Fortunately for them, being in a safe room, any hostile action leads to the aggressors being frozen in time, at least for the first time. Yeah, I know his name is Frank, but I have no explanation. I want to call him Frankie. This next example of a Chekov's gun takes a little bit longer for the payoff. This one has to do with the staircases. It's established pretty early on that monsters and mobs cannot go down the staircases according to both the goblins and to Mordecai. They disappear. They dissipate. There's not much else to say about that. Then they run into the Rage Elemental. The Rage Elemental is a level 93 that far exceeds Carl and Donut and everyone they're traveling with. And it's activated because an elderly man decided he needed to use the hallway as a bathroom. Since using the bathroom in the hallway is explicitly against the AI's rules, it launches the Rage Elemental at them. Unfortunately, we do lose Yolanda, and that's a topic for another Dungeon Crawler Carl series. Anyways, Carl uses this exploit to kill the Rage Elemental. Granted, he doesn't get any experience, he doesn't get any loot, but at least the pathway is safe for the elderly to get to the next floor. It is important to note that every Chekov gun that has been loaded so far has not gone off in this book. There was one loaded about how all the residents were cured of every minor little ill that they had, but it didn't improve their ability to think or remember. It didn't impact their mental faculties. It just improved their quality of life. There's also the Chekov gun that was loaded, that kind of a throwaway line by Mordecai on page 418, where he mentions there's this one lady who brought in 15 goats with her. She's still alive, and so are the goats. It's bizarre. There's this one show that is obsessed with her, end quote. It also loads the Chekov's gun that Maggie Mai and Frank Q, got it right that time, have the ability to track down Carl, particularly Maggie Mai. Another Chekov's gun that is loaded is the idea of surprise guests, as seen on Maestro's show. Donut mentions that maybe it's going to be Miss Bia. It's not at that point, but the gun is still loaded. I'm certain there are more buried in the text, but honestly, I'll leave them out there for you guys to find. So with foreshadowing, I specifically want to talk about Agatha's character. When Princess Donut, Meadowlark, and Agatha enter in the boss fight against the Tuskling on the first floor leading to the second floor, Agatha is announced as separate from Meadowlark. Carl has to pick up her cart and put it into his inventory, and of course she wails about having her cart stolen from her. She's portrayed as this crazy old lady. However, when he examines his inventory after he takes the cart out, there are 3 new items in his inventory that weren't there before and weren't awarded to him through loot boxes. In the replay of the boss fight, all mentions of Agatha are cut out. She's not shown in any of the clips, and she's not shown on the title card. Additionally, there is a time where Zev tries to get a hold of Carl when he's talking to Agatha, but the stream had cut out and she had trouble getting through to him, and that immediately dissipates once Agatha leaves him alone. These are all very interesting tidbits about Agatha that foreshadow some things going on with Agatha, and she may not be as she appears. Now, I place this in a different category than the Chekov's gun because this is very consistent foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a literary tool that is an indication of what is to come, according to Merriam-Webster, but not necessarily something that needs to be used in a scene. Another example of foreshadowing is that the crawl started early. We don't know this explicitly as readers, but we were told through Mordecai, we were told through Zev, that the crawl started early because the Borant Corporation is very close to declaring bankruptcy, and its creditors are outside their solar system waiting to collect on their debts. So they had to ramp up how soon the crawl started to begin with. We as readers get hints that something's not quite right because Mordecai mentions that there used to be a newsletter, but it was cut a few cycles ago. We get a lot of indications that the dungeon isn't quite wholly prepared to start. Throughout this book, we also get the indications that Carl may have this undercurrent of anger in his existence. Maybe it's fueled by his childhood trauma, maybe it's just at the unfairness of the situation, and a lot of it is due to the unfairness of the situation that he and Donut have been put in. Understandably so. But this is foreshadowing for the rest of the series, not necessarily this book. There's other foreshadowing for the rest of the series. However, I'm not going to get too much into it because, again, this is focused on the first book. And while the leveling provides this natural continuation of the story, we still do have to get invested in the characters and have plot threads to grasp onto in order to continue reading the books. Let's move on to the next section, my thoughts about this book. I really enjoyed Dungeon Crawler Carl. It was my first lit RPG book. It was actually a Christmas gift from my mother. She bought my husband and I the audiobook as well as the regular book for Christmas and said that if we both enjoyed it, she'd buy us the second book. I was in college at the time, so I actually had to put down the books, finish my degree, and then read all of the books that had been released. The reason for this is because Matt Dinniman has a very addictive, to me at least, style of writing, and I have the utmost respect for him and his craft. Granted, this is not high literature, but it's still kind of commentary on what our culture has become, because a core mechanic of the book is that Carl and Princess don't have to get views and sponsors. So in a way, it does feel kind of meta to comment on this book when that's such a core mechanic of it. I think a part of why these books were so entertaining to me is that they keep you guessing between heartfelt scenes like ones between Carl and Princess Donut, or ones where the AI is hitting on Carl. It keeps you guessing. It keeps you on your toes. And there's just something so kind of refreshing about that. A lot of the time I think we go in search of books that we think will fix us or help us, or be that one piece of high literature that breaks the mold and helps us break through our mental blocks. But sometimes we just need a distraction. Sometimes we just need a place to relax where the rules are defined and the characters win. And while the characters don't always win in Dungeon Crawler Carl, that is not at all what I'm saying that they always win, I think it's still worth a read, even if it's just to escape the world right now and read about a worse world. I do have a lot more thoughts and theories about events that will be happening in Dungeon Crawler Carl, but I'm only focusing on the first book right now. Another aspect of this that I keep forgetting to mention is that it reads really quick. I was certain that this book could not be more than 300 pages. It's 440. Over 400 pages, and it reads like it's only 350. Anyways, that about sums up my thoughts, so I'm going to get on to the conclusion now. Alright, this was the first installment, hopefully, of Dungeon Crawler Carl to the channel. This is easily my longest video on a single subject, so it's safe to say that I'm a fan of Dungeon Crawler Carl. I'm a fan of this series. Now I turn this to you, friend, enemy, or under review. Would you read Dungeon Crawler Carl? Do you know of any books similar to this one that you'd recommend? Do y'all have an appetite for more Dungeon Crawler Carl? I know I glossed over a lot of the details, so there's plenty left for more videos. Thanks for listening to me yap on this week about this, and thank you to all who have subscribed so far. Remember, liking, commenting, and subscribing is the easiest way to help the channel out. Being a fan is fun, and have a great day.